Danny Carlson stood near the observation window and watched the stars drift slowly past. The SciFi mothership was so large that he sometimes forgot he was even on a ship. It felt more like a floating city, cold and quiet and full of aliens who looked at humans the way people might look at insects. He had been living here for almost 2 years now. Earth had sent him as part of a small diplomatic team after the Treaty of Orion's Belt ended the brief war between humans and the SciFi. The treaty was simple. Humans would stay in their corner of the galaxy, the SciFi would stay in theirs, and a handful of humans would live aboard the alien mothership to keep communications open. Danny was not important. He knew this. He was a junior attaché, which was a fancy way of saying he carried messages and smiled at aliens who scared him. The SciFi were tall, almost 8 feet, with pale blue skin and 4 eyes that never seemed to blink. They moved slowly and spoke in deep voices that vibrated in Danny's chest. They did not like humans. They tolerated them because the treaty required it. But Danny had found something on this ship that made all the fear worth it. Her name was Sophie Grant. Sophie had arrived 6 months ago as part of a scientific exchange program. She was a xenobiologist, which meant she studied alien life forms. The SciFi had allowed her aboard to research their biology, though they watched her carefully and limited what she could see. Danny had met her on her 3rd day, when she got lost in the lower corridors, and he helped her find her way back to the human quarters. She had smiled at him, and something in Danny's chest had shifted like a key turning in a lock. They started talking after that. Just small conversations at first, then longer ones. Then they began meeting in secret, in the forgotten parts of the ship, where the SciFi rarely went. The lower cargo bays were dark and dusty, filled with old containers from conquered worlds. Nobody came down there. It was safe. Or so Danny hoped. The problem was simple and terrifying. The SciFi had strict laws about emotional bonding. They believed that attachment was a disease, a weakness that made species vulnerable. Long ago, they had used genetic engineering to remove strong emotions from their own biology. They felt nothing like love or passion. They saw these feelings as dangerous infections that could spread. A human falling in love with another human was bad enough, but if the SciFi thought that love might somehow influence their society, the punishment was death for both humans involved, and Earth would face diplomatic consequences that could lead to another war. Danny knew all of this, but when she looked at him in the dim light of the cargo bay, when she laughed at his jokes and held his hand and leaned her head against his shoulder, none of it seemed to matter. The universe was vast and cold, and they had found warmth in each other. How could that be wrong? Tonight, they met in their usual spot, behind a stack of metal containers marked with alien symbols Danny could not read. Sophie was already there when he arrived, sitting on an old crate with her tablet in her lap. "You're late," she said, but she was smiling. "Commander Renthax wanted to lecture me about proper corridor etiquette," Danny said, sitting down beside her. "Apparently I walk too fast. It disturbs the natural flow of the ship." Sophie laughed. It was a quiet sound, but it echoed in the empty bay, and Danny's heart swelled with happiness. He had never felt this way about anyone before. It scared him sometimes, how much he needed her. "I missed you," she said softly. "It's only been 2 days," he said. 2 days too many. Danny took her hand. Her fingers were warm against his. He thought about the future, about what would happen when their assignments ended, and they had to return to Earth. Would they stay together? Would they tell people about their secret love? Or would this remain hidden forever, a beautiful memory locked away in the darkness of an alien ship? He did not want to think about endings, not yet. "Tell me something good," Sophie said. "Something from home." Danny thought for a moment. "My sister had her baby last month, a little girl. They named her Lucy." "That's beautiful." Sophie squeezed his hand. Do you ever think about having kids someday? The question hung in the air between them. It was dangerous to talk about the future. But Danny could not help himself. Yeah, he said quietly. I think about it. Sophie leaned closer to him. Her eyes were bright in the dim light, and Danny felt like he was falling into them. He leaned forward to kiss her, and for a moment, everything else disappeared. The ship, the aliens, the danger. There was only Sophie, only this feeling, only now. Then he saw something move in the shadows. Danny pulled back sharply, his heart suddenly pounding. He stared into the darkness beyond the containers, searching for the shape he had glimpsed. Tall, thin, blue. What is it? Sophie whispered. I thought I saw. Danny trailed off. The shadows were still now, empty. He must have imagined it. The stress of living in constant fear was getting to him. It was nothing. But as they left the cargo bay and made their way back to the human quarters through separate routes, Danny could not shake the feeling that someone had been watching them. The back of his neck prickled with unease, and he kept glancing over his shoulder, expecting to see 4 unblinking eyes staring at him from the darkness. He saw nothing. The corridors were empty. The ship hummed with its usual quiet energy. Danny told himself he was being paranoid. The Zethkai had no reason to watch him. He was nobody. Just a junior diplomat carrying messages and smiling at aliens who barely noticed he existed. But deep in his gut, a voice whispered that everything was about to change. He tried to ignore it. He went back to his small room and lay on his narrow bed and stared at the ceiling. He thought about Sophie's smile. He thought about the warmth of her hand in his. He thought about the future they might never have. And somewhere in the depths of the ship, Queen Valkyra sat alone in her hidden chamber, watching surveillance footage of 2 humans holding hands in the darkness. Her 4 eyes narrowed with something that might have been curiosity, or hunger, or something else entirely. She had ruled the Zethkai for 300 years. She had seen empires rise and fall. She had crushed rebellions and conquered worlds. But she had never seen anything quite like this. 3 days passed, and nothing happened. Danny went about his duties as usual. He carried messages. He attended diplomatic meetings, where he stood quietly in the corner and took notes. He smiled at Zethkai, who looked through him like he was made of glass. He began to think he had imagined the figure in the cargo bay. The stress was getting to him. Living among aliens who could kill him at any moment was bound to make anyone a little paranoid. He was fine. Everything was fine. Then the summons came. Danny was at a diplomatic reception, standing near the wall with a glass of something purple that he was afraid to drink, when the royal guard approached him. The guard was massive, even by Zethkai standards, with armor that gleamed like black oil, and a face that showed no expression at all. Human designation Danny Carlson, the guard said. His voice was deep enough to rattle Danny's teeth. Queen Valkyra requests your presence in her private chamber. You will come now. Danny's blood turned to ice in his veins. The glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the floor, but he barely noticed. Around him, conversation stopped. Other diplomats, both human and Zethkai, turned to stare at him. The Queen's private chamber? Danny's voice came out as a whisper. There must be some mistake. I'm nobody. I'm just a junior attaché. There is no mistake. The guard's 4 eyes fixed on Danny without blinking. You will come now, or you will be brought. Danny looked around desperately, searching for someone who might help him. Admiral Patricia Moore, the commander of the human delegation, stood across the room. Her face was pale, and she gave Danny the smallest shake of her head. There was nothing she could do. When the Queen summoned someone, that person went. There was no other option. Danny followed the guard out of the reception hall and into the winding corridors of the ship. They walked for what felt like hours, going deeper and deeper into sections Danny had never seen before. The walls changed from smooth metal to something darker, carved with symbols that seemed to writhe in the dim light. The air grew colder. The sounds of the ship faded away until there was only silence and the echo of their footsteps. Danny thought about Sophie. He thought about the last time he had seen her, just that morning, when she had smiled at him across the cafeteria. He had wanted to go to her, to hold her, to tell her how much she meant to him. But there were too many eyes watching. There were always too many eyes. Now he might never see her again. The guard stopped in front of a door that looked like all the others, black metal with no markings. But when it opened, Danny saw a room unlike anything he had expected. He had heard stories about the Queen's hidden chamber. They said it was a place of torture, where enemies of the throne were taken apart piece by piece. They said screams echoed from its walls, and those who entered never came out alive. But this room was beautiful. It was filled with soft light from sources Danny could not see. The walls were covered with shelves, and on those shelves were artifacts from 100 different worlds. Strange sculptures, ancient books, weapons that gleamed with deadly elegance. In the center of the room was a single chair, carved from something that looked like black crystal, and sitting in that chair was Queen Valkyra. Danny had seen the Queen before, but always from a distance, always surrounded by guards and advisors. Up close she was terrifying. She was taller than any Zethkai he had ever met, nearly 9 feet, and her blue skin was pale as moonlight. Her 4 eyes gleamed with intelligence, and when they fixed on Danny, he felt like she was looking straight into his soul. "Leave us," the Queen said to the guard. Her voice was soft, but it carried absolute authority. The guard bowed and disappeared, and Danny was alone with the most powerful being in half the galaxy. "You know why you are here," the Queen said. It was not a question. Danny's throat was so dry he could barely speak. I'm not sure, Your Majesty." "Do not lie to me, Danny Carlson." The Queen raised one long-fingered hand, and a holographic screen appeared in the air beside her. On it, Danny saw himself. He saw Sophie. He saw them holding hands in the cargo bay. He saw them kissing in the darkness. His legs went weak. He wanted to fall to his knees and beg for mercy, but something told him that would only make things worse. If he was going to die, he would die standing. "I see you understand now," the Queen said. "You have violated our most sacred law. You have allowed yourself to become infected with emotional attachment. By rights, I should have you executed immediately." Danny waited for the killing blow. He thought of Sophie's face. He thought of home. He thought of all the things he would never do, all the words he would never say. But the blow did not come. Instead, the Queen leaned forward in her chair, and her 4 eyes narrowed with something that looked almost like curiosity. "Your species calls it love," she said slowly. "We removed this weakness from our biology 10,000 years ago. We saw it as a disease, a flaw that made us vulnerable. And yet your kind clings to it as though it were precious, as though it were strength rather than weakness." He stood in silence, trembling, waiting. "I have ruled for 300 years, the Queen continued. "I have conquered worlds. I have crushed rebellions. I have done everything that was required of me, and I have done it alone. Always alone." She paused. "I do not understand you, Danny Carlson. You have nothing. You are nothing. A small creature from a small world, surrounded by beings who could destroy you without effort. And yet you risk everything for this woman, for this feeling you call love." She leaned back in her chair and studied him with those 4 unblinking eyes. "I want you to explain it to me," she said. "I want you to make me understand." Danny stared at her. Of all the things he had expected, this was not among them. The queen of the Zethkai, the most feared ruler in the galaxy, wanted him to explain love? I don't know if I can, he said honestly. It's something you feel. Then, teach me to feel it. The queen's voice was soft, almost gentle. Tell me stories, share your experiences, help me understand what you have that I have lost. She stood, and even though she towered over him, Danny suddenly did not feel afraid anymore. He felt something unexpected. He felt sorry for her. If you do this, the queen said, I will protect you and your Sophie. I will allow your relationship to continue, but you must be honest with me. You must hide nothing. Can you do this, Danny Carlson? Danny thought about Sophie. He thought about the future. He thought about the strange and terrifying creature standing before him, who had everything except the one thing that made life worth living. Yes, he said, I can do this. The queen smiled. It was a small, strange expression on her alien face, but it was unmistakably a smile. Then we have an agreement, she said, but return tomorrow at the same time. We have much to discuss. Danny bowed and left the chamber on shaking legs. As the door closed behind him, he leaned against the wall and tried to breathe. He was alive. Sophie was safe. And somehow, impossibly, he had just become the confidant of the most powerful queen in the galaxy. Danny did not sleep that night. He lay on his narrow bed and stared at the ceiling, replaying every moment of his meeting with Queen Valkyra. Part of him still could not believe it had happened. Part of him expected guards to burst through his door at any moment and drag him away to execution. But the hours passed, and no one came. When morning arrived, Danny got up and went to find Sophie. She was in her laboratory, surrounded by holographic displays showing Zethkai cellular structures. When she saw Danny's face, she knew immediately that something was wrong. What happened? She asked, leading him to a corner where they could speak quietly. I heard you were summoned somewhere last night, but no one knew where. Danny told her everything. He told her about the hidden chamber, about the artifacts on the shelves, about the Queen's strange request. Sophie listened in silence, her face growing paler with every word. She knows about my mission, Sophie whispered when he finished. She must know that I'm gathering intelligence on Zethkai biology. Danny, we're completely at her mercy. She could destroy us whenever she wants. But she doesn't want to. Danny took Sophie's hands in his. She wants to understand us. She wants to understand love. Sophie shook her head slowly. This doesn't make sense. The Zethkai removed emotion from their species on purpose. They think it makes them stronger. Why would the Queen suddenly want to learn about feelings? I don't know, but I looked into her eyes, Sophie. She's lonely. I know that sounds crazy, but I could see it. She's been ruling alone for 300 years, surrounded by people who fear her. She's never had a real connection with anyone. They stood in silence for a long moment. Around them, the laboratory hummed with quiet energy. Other scientists moved between workstations, unaware of the conversation happening in the corner. This could be an opportunity, Sophie said finally. If you can build real trust with the Queen, you might learn things that could help humanity for generations. You could understand how they think, what they want, what they fear. Danny frowned. I don't want to use her. She's offering me something real. If I turn it into a manipulation, I'm no better than the people she's trying to protect herself from. Sophie touched his face gently. I'm not asking you to manipulate her. I'm asking you to be yourself. Be honest with her, just like she asked. And if you learn things along the way that can help our people, that's not betrayal. That's just paying attention. Danny thought about this for a long time. Sophie was right. He could be truthful with the Queen and still help humanity. The two things did not have to be in conflict. Okay, he said. I'll do it. But I need you to understand something. This isn't just a mission to me. I really do feel sorry for her. I want to help her, not just study her. Sophie smiled. That's why I love you, Danny. You actually care about people. Even people who could crush you like an insect. They held each other for a brief moment, knowing that others might be watching, not caring anymore. The Queen already knew their secret. There was a strange freedom in that. That evening, Danny returned to the hidden chamber. The Queen was waiting for him, sitting in her crystal chair, with her 4 eyes fixed on the door. She gestured for him to sit in a smaller chair that had not been there before. You came back, she said. I was not certain you would. I gave you my word, Danny replied. Humans take that seriously. The Queen tilted her head, studying him. Tell me about your first love, she said. The first time you felt this way about someone. Danny was surprised by the question, but he answered honestly. He told the Queen about a girl named Katie from his hometown. They had been 16 years old. He had thought about her constantly, dreamed about her at night, felt his heart race every time she walked into a room. It had not lasted. Teenage love rarely does. But it had been real, and it had taught him what his heart was capable of. The Queen listened without interrupting. When Danny finished, she was silent for a long time. This girl, Katie, she said finally. Did she know how you felt? Eventually, I told her after months of being afraid. She felt the same way, at least for a while. And when it ended, when the feeling stopped, did you wish you had never felt it at all? Danny shook his head. No. Even though it hurt when it ended, I wouldn't trade the experience. It made me who I am. It taught me how to love better, how to be brave with my feelings. The Queen leaned back in her chair. Her eyes were distant, as if she was looking at something far away. My ancestors believed that removing emotion would make us perfect, she said quietly. No distractions, no weakness, no attachment to cloud our judgment. We would be pure minds, ruling the galaxy through logic and strength. Did it work? The Queen's mouth twisted into something that might have been a bitter smile. We have conquered half the known worlds. We'd have crushed every enemy who stood against us. By any measure, we have succeeded beyond imagination. She paused. And yet I sit here alone, in a room full of treasures from dead civilizations, talking to a creature from a species we nearly destroyed, asking him to explain the one thing my people threw away. Danny felt a wave of sadness wash over him. He had expected the Queen to be a monster. He had expected coldness and cruelty. Instead, he found something unexpected. He found grief. Your Majesty, he said carefully, can I ask you something? You may. Do you ever feel anything, even small things, when you see something beautiful, or when you accomplish something you worked hard for, or when someone disappoints you? The Queen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer than Danny had ever heard it. Sometimes I feel shadows, she admitted. Echoes of things that should not exist in my biology anymore. When I watch the stars, there is something in my chest that I cannot name. When I make a decision that costs lives, there is a heaviness that my advisors tell me should not be there. She looked at Danny with something like desperation in her 4 eyes. My ancestors did not remove emotion completely. They could not. It is woven too deeply into the fabric of consciousness. They only buried it, made it quiet, made it almost impossible to reach. But it is still there, Danny Carlson. Somewhere deep inside me, it is still there. Danny understood then why she had summoned him. She was not just curious about love. She was looking for a way back to herself. She was looking for permission to feel the things that had been stolen from her people long ago. I'll help you, he said. I'll tell you every story I know. I'll answer every question you have. But you have to promise me something in return. Name it. If you start to feel things, really feel them, you can't run away. You can't decide it's too hard and shut it down again. Feeling things is painful sometimes. It's terrifying sometimes. But that's part of it. That's how you know it's real. The Queen considered this for a long time. Then she nodded slowly. I accept your terms, Danny Carlson. I will not run from whatever I find inside myself. She extended one long-fingered hand, and after a moment of hesitation, Danny shook it. Her skin was cool and smooth, utterly unlike human flesh. Now, the Queen said, settling back in her chair with something that almost looked like eagerness. Tell me another story. Months passed. Danny's meetings with Queen Valkyra became a regular part of his life on the ship. Twice a week, he would walk through the winding corridors to her hidden chamber, and they would talk for hours. He told her stories about human history, about great loves and terrible sacrifices, about parents who died for their children, and soldiers who gave everything for people they would never meet. He told her about his own life, about Sophie, about the small moments of joy that made everything worthwhile. And slowly, something began to change. The first sign came during a council meeting that Danny attended as part of his diplomatic duties. A young HFY servant had spilled a ceremonial drink on Commander Renthax's armor. The commander had raised his hand to strike the servant down, a punishment that was common and expected for such failures. Stop, the Queen said. Everyone in the room froze. Commander Renthax's hand hung in the air, his 4 eyes fixed on the Queen in confusion. Your Majesty? The servant made a mistake, Queen Valkyra said calmly. Mistakes happen. There is no need for violence. Let the servant clean up and return to duties. The room was silent. Danny could feel the shock radiating from every HFY present. This was not how things were done. This was not how they had been done for 10,000 years. But no one argued with the Queen. The servant scrambled away, trembling with relief, and the meeting continued, as if nothing had happened. Later that evening, Danny sat in the hidden chamber across from Valkyra. That was unexpected, he said carefully. What you did in the council meeting. The Queen's 4 eyes met his. The servant reminded me of someone, a young creature, frightened, trying hard to do everything right. The old me would not have noticed. The old me would have seen only the failure. And now? Now I see more. She paused. Is this what you call compassion? Danny smiled. I think it might be. But not everyone was pleased with the Queen's changes. As the weeks went on, Danny began to notice whispers in the corridors. He saw HFY advisors exchanging glances when the Queen made unexpected decisions. He felt eyes watching him whenever he walked through the ship. Commander Renthax was the most concerned of all. He was the Queen's most loyal enforcer, a warrior who had served her for over a century. He believed in the old ways completely. Emotion was weakness. Mercy was dangerous. The Queen's recent behavior troubled him deeply. Danny first learned about the brewing conspiracy from Sophie. Her intelligence work had put her in contact with certain information networks on the ship, and she heard things that others did not. There's talk of a coup, she told Danny one night in their cargo bay meeting place. Renthax is gathering supporters. He thinks the Queen has been corrupted by human influence. By you. Danny's stomach dropped. What are they planning? I don't know the details, but they want to remove the Queen from power and install someone who will restore the old traditions. They're calling it a purification. Danny sat down heavily on a crate, his mind racing. He had grown to genuinely care about Queen Valkyra over the past months. She was not the monster he had once feared. She was a lonely soul reaching towards something beautiful, something her people had lost long ago. He could not let her be destroyed. But if he warned her, he would be choosing her over humanity. If the coup succeeded, it might create chaos that could benefit Earth. A weakened HFY empire would be a safer galaxy for humans. I know what you're thinking, Sophie said softly. You're wondering if you should let it happen. Danny could not meet her eyes. If Renthax takes over, Danny said, the Zethkai might tear themselves apart with infighting. It could give humanity decades of peace. Sophie knelt beside him and took his face in her hands. Danny, look at me. What would you be if you let that happen? What would we be? You've spent months teaching the Queen about love and connection and the beauty of human emotion. If you betray her now, you prove that everything you told her was a lie. You prove that human feelings are just weapons we use to manipulate others. Danny felt tears prick at his eyes. So what do I do? You do what's right. You act with integrity. That's what separates real strength from simple selfishness. Danny thought about everything he had told the Queen. He had spoken about sacrifice, about putting others before yourself, about the courage it takes to love someone even when it's dangerous. How could he claim to believe in those things if he abandoned her now? The next evening, Danny went to the hidden chamber earlier than usual. The Queen noticed immediately that something was wrong. "You are troubled," she said. "Tell me." Danny took a deep breath and told her everything. He told her about Commander Renthax and the conspiracy. He told her about his own temptation to let events unfold. He told her that he had chosen to warn her, even though it might not be in humanity's best interest. The Queen listened in silence. When Danny finished, her 4 eyes studied him for a long moment. "You considered letting them destroy me," she said. Her voice held no anger, only curiosity. "I'm sorry. Do not apologize. You were honest about your own darkness. That takes more courage than hiding it." She stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the stars. "I knew about Renthax's plans," she said quietly. "I have suspected for some time, but I did not have proof, and I was not certain how deep the conspiracy ran." Danny stared at her in surprise. "You knew? Then why did you need me to tell you?" The Queen turned to face him. For the first time, Danny saw something unmistakable in her expression. It was warmth. "Because I needed to know if I could trust you," she said. "Any spy could have brought me information about a coup, but only someone who truly cared would admit that they had thought about letting it happen. You gave me honesty when a lie would have been easier. That is worth more than any intelligence report." She returned to her chair and sat down slowly. "You have changed me, Danny Carlson. I feel things now that I have not felt in 300 years. It frightens me, but I do not want to go back to the emptiness I had before." Danny felt his own eyes filling with tears. "What will you do about Renthax?" "I will deal with him, but not in the old way. I have a chance to show my people that there is another path. I do not know if they will follow, but I must try." She reached out and placed her hand on Danny's. Her cool fingers closed around his warm ones. "Thank you," she said simply. "Thank you for showing me what I had lost." Danny smiled through his tears. "That's what friends are for." The Queen's 4 eyes widened slightly. "Friends. Yes, I suppose that is what we are." She smiled back, and it was the most genuine expression Danny had ever seen on her alien face. Queen Velkira moved quickly. Within hours of Danny's warning, her most trusted guards had surrounded Commander Renthax and his conspirators. The coup never had a chance to begin. Danny watched the arrests from a distance, standing in the shadows of a corridor as Renthax was led away in restraints. The commander's 4 eyes burned with hatred when they found Danny in the crowd. "Human poison," Renthax snarled. "You have infected our queen with your weakness. The Empire will fall because of you." Danny said nothing. He simply watched as the commander was taken away to face judgment. The entire ship waited to see what the Queen would do. Tradition demanded execution. For 10,000 years, traitors had been put to death in elaborate public ceremonies. Their names were erased from all records. Their families were stripped of honor and status. This was the Zethkai way. But Queen Velkira did something no one expected. She called a gathering of the entire ship. Every Zethkai, every human, everyone aboard the mothership assembled in the Great Hall. The Queen stood on a raised platform, looking down at the thousands of faces turned toward her. "Commander Renthax and his followers attempted to overthrow my rule," she said. Her voice echoed through the vast space, carried by speakers so that all could hear. "By our ancient law, their lives are forfeit." The crowd waited in silence. Danny held his breath. "But I have learned something in recent months," the Queen continued. "I have learned that there are other ways, stronger ways. Our ancestors removed emotion from our biology because they believed it made us weak. They were wrong." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Danny saw shock on Zethkai faces, confusion, even fear. "Emotion is not weakness," Valkyra said firmly. "Connection is not a flaw. The ability to feel, to care, to love others even when it is difficult. These things require more courage than any battle, more strength than any conquest." She raised one hand, and the crowd fell silent again. "Commander Renthax will not be executed. He and his followers will be exiled to the outer colonies. They will live. They will have time to consider whether the old ways are truly worth dying for." The silence that followed was the loudest thing Danny had ever heard. No one moved. No one spoke. The Queen had just overturned 10,000 years of tradition with a single decision. Then, slowly, something remarkable happened. A young Zethkai near the front of the crowd bowed their head in acceptance. Then another. Then another. Like a wave spreading through the hall, more and more Zethkai bowed, acknowledging their Queen's authority, even as she changed everything they knew. Danny could see faces twisted with anger and doubt. But most did. Most were willing to follow their Queen into unknown territory. Danny felt tears streaming down his face. He looked across the hall and found Sophie. She was crying too, her hand pressed against her mouth in amazement. 1 week later, Danny and Sophie were summoned to the Queen's hidden chamber together. It was the first time Sophie had been inside, and her eyes went wide as she took in the artifacts from 100 conquered worlds. "Thank you both for coming," Queen Valkyra said. She sat in her crystal chair, but she seemed different now, lighter somehow, less burdened. "Your Majesty," Sophie said carefully, "may I ask what happens now, between our peoples?" The Queen smiled. It still looked strange on her alien face, but it was becoming more natural with practice. "That is why I called you here," she said. "I want to show you something that no human has ever seen. Something that no Zethkai born in the last 10,000 years knows about." She stood and walked to a section of the wall that looked no different from any other. When she touched it, a hidden panel slid open, revealing a small alcove filled with very old objects. "This is why I call this my hidden chamber," the Queen said. "Not because of what happens here, but because of what I have hidden." She reached into the alcove and pulled out a small crystal cube. When she touched its surface, holographic images appeared in the air. Images of Zethkai, unlike any Danny had seen before. These aliens were laughing, embracing each other, playing with children. Their 4 eyes were bright with emotion. "These are records from before the purification," Valkyra said quietly. "Before my ancestors removed emotion from our species. My grandmother preserved them in secret and passed them down through generations of queens. We were always meant to remember what we lost." Sophie stepped closer to the images, her scientist's mind trying to understand what she was seeing. They looked so different, so alive. "They were alive," the Queen said, "in a way that we have not been for 10,000 years. They felt joy and sorrow. They formed bonds that meant something. They were not perfect, but they were whole." She turned to face Danny and Sophie directly. I want to propose a new relationship between our peoples. Not just tolerance, not just treaties, a true partnership. I believe that humans have something to teach us about being whole again. And perhaps we have things to teach you as well. Danny's heart swelled with hope. You mean cultural exchange? Scientific cooperation? I mean friendship, the Queen said simply. Between our species, between individuals. She looked at Danny with warmth in her 4 eyes. You showed me that it is possible for a human and a Zethkai to truly know each other, to care for each other. If we can do that, so can others. She gestured toward Danny and Sophie. I want you two to serve as the first ambassadors of this new relationship. Your love for each other will no longer be hidden. It will be celebrated as proof that connection across species is possible. Sophie gripped Danny's hand tightly. This is more than we ever could have hoped for. It is more than I could have hoped for, the Queen replied. A few months ago, I was empty. I had power and knowledge and the fear of everyone around me, but I had nothing real. Now I have a friend who tells me stories about human love. Now I have hope that my people might someday remember what it means to feel. Danny stepped forward and did something no human had ever done before. She was tall, and her body was cold, but when she put her long arms around him, there was something unmistakably warm in the gesture. Thank you, Danny said, for giving us a chance, for giving yourself a chance. The Queen held him for a long moment, then gently stepped back. Go now, she said. Begin your new mission. Show both our peoples what is possible. Danny and Sophie bowed and left the chamber, hand in hand. Behind them, Queen Valkyra stood alone among her artifacts, looking at the holographic images of her ancestors. For the first time in 300 years, she felt something she could finally name. It was hope. Outside the chamber, Danny pulled Sophie close and kissed her. They did not hide in shadows this time. They stood in the middle of the corridor, 2 humans in love on an alien ship, and they did not care who saw them. We did it, Sophie whispered. We actually changed things. Danny smiled and brushed a strand of hair from her face. We showed them what humanity can do. Not with weapons or technology, just with this. He touched his heart. Sophie laughed and kissed him again. You're such a romantic. You love it. I really do. They walked away together, toward a future neither of them could have imagined when they first met in those dark corridors so many months ago. Behind them, the Queen remained in her hidden chamber, holding the crystal cube in her hands. She thought about everything Danny had taught her, about love and sacrifice and the courage to feel things that hurt. She thought about her people, and whether they could learn to feel again after so many generations of emptiness. She did not know the answer. But, for the first time in 300 years, Queen Valkyra was not afraid of uncertainty. She was excited by it. She smiled in her empty chamber, and the expression felt like coming home.